Pat Condell has been getting a lot of stick, a lot of criticism recently, specifically since he did a video in support of the UK Independence Party, but also in relation to some of his statements about Islam. And I think a lot of it's completely deserved, to be honest with you, but I think the reason why it's deserved isn't that what you're saying is always incorrect or even necessarily hypocritical, although I think some of it is. It's to do with, I think, why a person makes atheistic statements and what kind of what kind of atheist they are in a sense, but not even that. And I think Pat Condell is a very specific kind of atheist, or is an atheist for very specific purposes, with very specific agendas, which are quite different to somebody like Thunderfoot, or somebody like Coughlin, or somebody like Lacey Green. Who else? Yeah, you know, the big names, atheist, amazing atheist. You know, it's got a very different set of agendas, really. And for me, it's down to a number of different reasons why a person would be an atheist. I mean, they're all covered in the literature. You know, obviously, God delusion covers a lot of the reasons. You know, because people are atheists often because in a kind of Thunderfoot mould, because religion makes truth claims which are contrary to experimentation, or contrary to the best knowledge gathering processes we have so far. You know, I mean, this is the reason to be atheist that opposes the teaching of creationism in American schools, or opposes the kind of pseudo-scientific claims that are made about the Quran. You know, it's that whole raft of stuff, which is about, I guess, League of Reason kind of stuff, really, which is about protecting the Enlightenment project in terms of its relationship to the development of human knowledge, in which religion is seen as an archaic means of arriving at what was felt to be knowledge at the time, and which is, you know, counterproductive in a modern society. So I think there's that reason, and that's perfectly valid. And as I say, Thunderfoot probably exemplifies that on YouTube. Then there's a kind of moral response to it, moral reasons to be atheist, a recognition that that theism and religious beliefs tend to make moral claims, not just, as I say, not just truth claims, not just epistemological claims, but also moral claims. And many of those many people like myself would find offensive. You know, if a religious person is claiming that homosexuality is evil, or that you know, the kind of Right to Life campaign is used to justify the bombing of abortion clinics, all this kind of stuff, that's a good reason to oppose it, because it's making moral claims based on its own kind of logic, its own dogma, and so that's a good reason to go against it. I'm trying to think of someone who does that, actually. I guess Amazing Atheist kind of does that, or used to, more so than now. I think Phil Hellenes has made some statements like that, and maybe AngieAntiTheist, possibly. Yeah, it's that kind of anti-morality thing. But a third reason, which I think Pat Condell nails quite well, I have to say, in his defence, is political anti-theism. Political anti-theism, which is it's a secular project designed to ensure the separation of church and state. I mean, that's what it is about, isn't it, really, anti-theism? This is the Christopher Hitchens line on religion poisons everything. And oh god, getting attacked by bugs. Oh well, it's probably God actually doing this. Yeah, anti-theist, political anti-theist, making sure that the voices of religion are not heard in the seats of governmental power. I mean, that's what that's about. Whichever the religion that is, you know, whether it be Islam, whether it be Christianity, whether it be Scientology, whether it be whatever, you know what I mean? And again, quite rightly, there will be things to be said about that. You know, there's very specific complaints to be made about when those lines are transgressed. And I think Pat Condell has been very good at that, actually, to be honest, in the past. As a speaker, not as a YouTuber, because he doesn't get into discussion, but I think he's, you know, he's a very convincing speaker in terms of that kind of political anti-theism. what's interesting for me about the last one, anti-theism, is of course you don't really need to, you don't even need to be an atheist to be a political anti-theist. Or you're basically a secularist. That's a radical secularist. You know, so I guess at least some of the founding fathers of the United States were something like radical political anti-theists, even though some of them at least were theists or deists at least. Deists at the least. Fuck's sake. And yet argued for the separation of church and state. You know, for means of protection of people's rights, really. And I think to the extent that Pat Condell does that, it's a good thing. I think he's made some slip-ups. I think the whole supporting UKIP was a mistake, for reasons I've already talked about. He claimed it was a one issue election to do with governance from Europe, but I think that's just bullshit, really. And particularly aligning himself with UKIP, which is, as I say, for the establishment of a relationship with church and state, for the enhancement and the continuation of that relationship, which is the opposite of political anti-theism. If you're being politically anti-theistic, you would want to align yourself with a party that is absolutely about that separation. Or you want to start your own party, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. Anyhow, yeah, and I wish in a way that Pat Condell would go back to doing that much more clearly. You know, that last video we did about Jesus and the Sun God, I don't know what that was about. Yeah, well, obviously I know what it was about, but it seemed quite out of step with the videos on this political anti-theism thing. So I kind of wish if that was his métier, that he'd stick to it and not confuse it with other things. And also, you know, obviously, when you are taking on a particular line like political anti-theism, you are going to find yourself in bed with some strange partners, and I think it would be quite good if occasionally he would distance himself from those. And you know, and all of us are involved in that. We occasionally need to distance ourselves from those people who seem to be singing from the same hymn book that we are, but for very, very different purposes. You know, poor old Pat's got lots of BNP people on his site now, simply because they, like him, are concerned about Islamic influence in political discourse in this country, but for completely different reasons, you know. And I would say he needs to distance himself from that. And I know he has. He said he's not racist and so on, but I think he needs to. Well, it's not for me to tell him what to do. Personally, I would be very upfront about that. Yeah. That's it. So yeah, 3 reasons to be atheist. For science and reason, which is the thunderfoot, against religiously founded moral injunctions, which might be the amazing atheist, might be, I don't know, maybe Lacey Gray, who knows, other people, and the political anti-theist line, which might be Pat Condell.